This is Rugby Unity. I am David Pembroke, and today we will be joined by Ewen McKenzie, and Ewen McKenzie alone. I've just had a note from Eddie Jones, who has told me that unfortunately he can't join us today because he has another commitment in Japan that takes priority. And certainly as he builds towards the match between Japan and Australia in Tokyo at the National Stadium on October 25, I am sure he is going to be very focused and very busy in terms of preparing his side for that particular match. So no Eddie Jones today, but we do have the great Ewen McKenzie, and he joins me now. Ewen McKenzie, before I come to you, as we do most weeks, we feature the voice of the third voice, as we call them here at Rugby Unity. And DVE says from YouTube, great discussion, gents. Thanks for your insights, high quality of analysis and discussion. Chris Burke on Spotify says another excellent podcast. Outdoors and Ocean from YouTube says fascinating how the referees seem to have bowed down to technology. So many of the small missed things that lead up to points are missed. We can only hope for consistency, but doubt we will see it. And again, I will be putting in our request for a representative from World Rugby, from the referees, to join us on the podcast. So stand by. And Lutando Monduilia from YouTube says, what a great pod. Very balanced and unbiased. Always very informative and great rugby minds. So a big thanks to you, audience, for your contribution. And please keep the comments and the questions coming through. And a little bit later on, I'll be putting a range of questions from the audience to Ewen McKenzie. But for the moment, Ewen McKenzie, let's get back to the rugby and the final round of the Rugby Championship. The Wallabies, not good enough against the All Blacks in dreadful conditions in Perth on Saturday night. What were the three things that you took away from the match on Saturday night?
Well, as you say, it was difficult conditions, but in the end, 4-1. New Zealand were pretty emphatic in those conditions. So for me, when I looked at it, Australia, as has been the case, their tackling was very good. They tackled and tackled and tackled, and created ruck pressure, and they did everything they could to try and put pressure on New Zealand. But in the end, New Zealand had a bit too much panache to be able to, in the conditions, for Australia to stop them. And on the inverse of that, there wasn't a lot happening on the Australian side of it. There was that disallowed try that everyone talked about, but that was really that was about it. Apart from the close in try they scored, there wasn't much else going on in terms of excitement. So it was a bit of a drab affair. Obviously, New Zealand. So that Australia's tackling was excellent. I thought Jordie Barrett I thought he was the difference in the backs. His ability to sum up the game, the conditions, and to poke that ball in behind, the little grubbers in behind, that created all sorts of havoc. They'd obviously looked at that, picked that the Australian back three were deeper than probably normal, and they got some pay out of that. Certainly that try that Quinn scored was very good with off the Falcon. So I thought he was the difference for me. He was one of he made a difference in attack for New Zealand, where they'd been struggling in the backside in the back line most of the tournament. And the other thing was, from a negative point of view, New Zealand's goal kicking. I mean, you sat there and the score didn't change much for the middle part of the game. It just sat there, and I couldn't help but think there was a missed penalty. There was a bunch of missed conversions. One was virtually in front. Whether that was going to cost New Zealand. And in the end, they scored that try, so it made it 28-14, but it could have been 30, 34, 36, 35. They could have done it easier and kept that margin, but Australia had enough incentive. They were only one score away from sort of being right back in it, and they got right back in it, but they missed two, and then New Zealand got away. But that's pretty much the story of the season from Australia, where you get the opposition gets away, Australia comes back into the game, and then there's a score at the end, and that was it. So. They were the three things. New Zealand's got to fix their goal kicking. They were a bit better in phase, but at one point they were virtually passing backwards from the halfback to the 10, and then trying to create attack from there. Look, it was so deep, and he put up some high balls and whatever. The contest was a bit 50-50 in terms of the aerial battle, but in the end, I also wrote down one point. New Zealand were picking scrums because their scrum actually functioned really well, particularly in the first half, and Australia were choosing lineouts, and the lineout contest was pretty even. So the edge was in New Zealand's scrum in the early part of the game, and that's probably where they set the game up from there. So other than that, we can talk about the referee and whatever. I stopped making notes on trying to understand the ruck penalties. He was trying to be consistent, to be fair, but there was some strange decisions, but there are every game, so that's the way it is. So Australia had possession, New Zealand had territory, and territory mattered.
Mm. So let's just, go to both teams individually, perhaps. So the Wallabies, again, another loss, a brave loss, and, they're trying hard, and you can see some improvements, but you also see error in their game. There was a period not too many years ago where it became almost a habit. And they were very hard to watch, the Wallabies, because they would, they would lose consistently. This season, again, we have seen improvement. Certainly the engagement around the team has improved. But are you concerned that perhaps we might be drifting back towards that performance where, yes, the performances are okay, but the wins don't come, and Australia continues to struggle against the better teams?
Well, I think Australia came up with a method that worked really well, worked against the Lions, and they were playing that sort of zigzag, playing to the short side, using the big forwards and sort of belting away, and then they were able to then create some space. They'd suddenly flick it wide and they'd create an opportunity that way. That works, but the good teams watch. Everyone watches the video and they try and work out. And they look for cues and they look for method of how that happens. I've seen comments that it's sort of a chaotic method of play, but there's definitely a plan there. But teams are getting better at defending it, and they lost Skelton in the game, but the method shouldn't have changed. I saw a glimpse of it just in the second half. It just came back for 5 minutes and they just seemed to get back into their pattern and look quite good, but they weren't able to sustain that. And so the forward effort, the way they're playing in the forwards then requires something from the backs. I don't see the structure or the organisation in the backs other than maybe a contested kick, which they did better at in this game, more so than previous games. So you can see where they've worked on bits and pieces. The scrum suffered in the first half, and you do have to look at selections around that. I mean, they put Alan Alatoa back in at tight head, took Tupu out, and the scrum suffered. There was a change there. It wasn't forced, but there was a change there, and I think that and the scrum was better in the second half with Tupu and Robinson on there. So you got to look at that and say, well, are we making it hard for ourselves or what? Because the scrum was a point of difference, and it hasn't been in some games. It hasn't been that many scrums. They were put under pressure, and New Zealand were able to generate some penalties and things out of that situation and create a mindset with the referee. So. And that was, for me, selection there. So they lost Skelton, but scrum was still struggling anyway. So you've got to look at what's an own goal in terms of selections. There were changes. Do they have to make changes? So there were bits and pieces like that you need to go back and review. They'll no doubt do that. But that's been the history of the team. There's been lots of players coming in and out. I've talked about it previously about the players having the confidence to know they're in the team and getting rewarded if they play well, if they stay there. Now, I'm not saying Tupu, for instance, he had a few gave away a few penalties in previous games against Argentina, no arms tackles, things like that. So discipline's part of it. But the scrum I thought did suffer, and that was significant. So in terms of Australia, you don't want to be Ireland. Ireland for 20 years, we're just happy to finish second, and a two-horse race finishing second is not a great thing. But they sort of happy with if they put on a good show. And now they're a much more, they're a formidable team now, but they have that sort of culture that developed around the team where they fight hard but didn't quite get there, and everyone will sort of seem to be happy with that the effort was there. But I think Harry said it after the game. They're not there to finish second. They really want to convert the effort into wins, and I don't think that they'll be happy with what they're doing. So they've got to look at the total strategy, understand that the opponents, the good teams, are looking at you and working out how to play against you and working out ways to play. Understand you've got to, when you're picking teams and stuff like that, you can't have own goals where you make problems for yourself. And then you've just got to get more out of your assets. I don't think we're seeing a lot in the backline area. We've talked about that. There's a lot of individual brilliance, and we see great moments. But in terms of a unit, I'm not seeing a great deal there to be able to capitalise on. That's sort of the way that showed up in the game. Nothing really happened. They were there on the scoreboard, and for me, it was more because New Zealand didn't convert their kicks. I mean, they only kicked at 45%, 43% in the game. The goal kicking, that's pretty low. So for a team of New Zealand's, and they'd be pissed off if they'd lost that game just on the fact that they didn't kick goals.
You're coach of the Wallabies. You're heading to Europe via Japan. What are you doing? To make those improvements, to get those wins, and what sort of a win-loss ratio out of this end of the year should the Wallaby fans be expecting?
I think they'd want to go on that tour based on the rate of improvement. They go on that tour and should be thinking about winning every game. Like I think they're coming up against good teams, but they've done a lot of hard work and graft. I think they're going to get their selections right. I think one of the big mysteries, or one of the things that creates not apprehension, I don't know what the word is, but is the fact that you've got players coming in and out. And either we get used to that, where we're going to pick the skeletons, bring him in for a game. He lasted 10 minutes, but he was there, and obviously you have to integrate players back in and whatever, and they make a difference. Or they should make a difference, but he didn't get a chance to because he got injured. That players coming in and out can make it a bit confusing. So they need to, I guess, settle on a squad and get on with it. And so the objective of the tour is what? Is it to bring players through for the World Cup in 2 years' time? And I don't know what the brief is. It would be interesting to know what the brief is for Schmidt, given that he's handing over to Les Kiss next year. What's his brief? Is to keep bringing talent on, or what? So is he going to ignore the overseas players and just bring on new talent? He's sort of been doing that in a de facto way, but that'll be the key. What's the brief? But I would have thought, given the intensity and the resilience and the tackling, they've got some really good assets there to take on tour. If they can take that, they should be looking at doing quite well. They've got some tough games there, but they should be looking to win each one.
And the All Blacks, what's your assessment of them at the moment? To me, something doesn't look right. They're not at that traditional sort of All Black standard, because a traditional All Black high-performing team would have really put Australia away the other day. I really think they would have got on top of them. But to me, I don't know what it is, but it's just something that doesn't feel quite right about the way they're performing. What's your assessment of the All Blacks as they stand at the end of the Rugby Championship?
I think that there's depth in a couple of positions that they're working on. The thing that was impressive for me is, Quinn Tapia and Carter. So two of the newest guys in the team were most impressive guys and made a difference. So they're getting some pay out of their new players, and so we need guys like that to stand up, and then that puts pressure on some of the old guard to be able to deliver. I think they're still got to work out. There's a few selection decisions there they've got to work out. To be fair to them, they played without their two props from the previous week, so to lose both props and then to scrum really well, those guys have taken their opportunity. I think that they've put some pressure on them and give the selectors something to think about, because I rate the two guys that started against Australia, that the props, that they know how to scrum and play. I thought they played well. So they got some selection issues there, but I think for me it seems to be in the phase play about how they create opportunity. And I still think there's a depth issue. They've been able to take the ball to the line, and I thought Jordie Barrett showed the way, whether that was the plan or whether he just did it. But he took the ball to the line and he just poking the ball through, simple tactic, but that worked really well and they got pay out of that. So that's what you need rather than sort of retreating and then kicking and then having chases. That's all that seemed to happen. It seemed to be quite deep. Even the phase play seemed quite deep. So the forwards are always running backwards. So there's something in that space there. The line speed of teams today, and you see it in the other game as well, they're sprinting. I noticed Australia do it now. I noticed South Africa do it. They literally start 5 metres behind the advantage line and they start running when they see the ball of the ruck. So they're hitting the line, the advantage line. They're hitting it at pace. So they're taking up the space between the defence and the attack in milliseconds. They're taking up the space and there's no room for the attack to operate. So you've got to think about that. You've got to be able to play at that and be able to then pick an option or have an option and pick an option that then can get in behind that. And there's been a little bit of that. I've seen James O'Connor's been able to do that quite well for Australia on a few occasions, ball playing in that tight space. I don't think New Zealand's quite there. They've been more of an offloading team as opposed to ball playing. So there's something there at 10. And I don't know what the depth situation is there. You take out Barrett, you got McKenzie, then what's after that? I saw an article about Ruben Love, who I think has had a really good season. I quite like him. I think he could be the future type player, but they need to develop a bit of depth in there because they've been pretty much churning the same two guys since Mo'unga left, pretty much churning the same two options, and I don't know that that's the future, so there's some opportunity there maybe with this tour. They'll try something a bit different. But to be fair to the All Blacks, they keep winning. They struggle and it's not pretty and whatever, but they still edge out the win. That's the difference between them and Australia. They've edged out the wins in the hard games. They've defended Eden Park twice in this championship. So they keep at it, and you've got to give them credit for that. And that's So they've done a little bit better than Australia in that sense. And to be honest, it's only for and against that cost them the title. So that's how close it was, So you got to give them some kudos for that, especially given the injuries and changes they had going into this last game.
All right, so that's the All Blacks. Australia, Bledisloe Cup stays in New Zealand for another year. But then the final match of the Rugby Championship took place in London under cloudy skies. Springboks 29, Argentina 27. What was your assessment, and what were the three things that you took from
the three things
for that match?
The Argentinians never read the narrative, right? They just don't get the narrative. The narrative was that South Africa was going to put a cricket score on them, and that was that. Yeah. But they didn't read the script, so no one told the Argentinians that was the case. So they got stuck in. The South African, that's 1 point. South Africans have now got a formula for all occasions. So they've got the whiz bang we've talked about. We've seen that in the backs. But that didn't suit this occasion. This occasion was the bash barge option, and we saw that. And Mark's got a couple of tries, and it's just intense play close to the line, and that's what that was the difference. 4 tries to 3. It wasn't much in this game, and so although if you watch it as it played out, South Africa weren't a threat of losing the game, and Argentina caught up at the end, but it was a closer game than you think. And in fact, they ran the same number of metres each. So it was a much closer game than people probably thought. The difference for me, the third point, was that the South African scrum was the difference in the end. They got stuck right into them. And I like that. I like to see it like a dominant scrum. If you've got a dominant scrum, you want to be able to get paid for it, and they did. And they put it right to Argentina, and that used to be a traditional Argentinian strength. Well, it wasn't in that game, and that was the difference. There was a couple of yellow cards. The yellow cards issue. So that were the 3 point. But going to the yellow cards, there's one on either side. The Argentinians lost their prop, and that New Zealand scored 2 tries in that period. And so we're on a 4-3, 4 tries to 3. The yellow cards is such a significant point in the game. Like it becomes a point in the game and I can't get my head around the idea that that's how the game should be won, that you should be winning at a point of indiscretion I get it if it's foul play, but there's so many things now constituting, and we saw it in the Australia game, a hooper going off. Like it does cost you. It costs Australia a try.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
You know, the impact of the yellow card in the game is significant, and I just got to. I can't rationalise in my head that that's the way we want to see games sorted. People stop talking about it, and I talk about it, but I just don't know if that's how we want the games to be decided. Just, suddenly they score 2 tries and they're down a player, and you're shuffling around because you've got to have scrums, so you've got to take a back rower off, and all this sort of stuff goes on. I just don't know if there's a better way. I get foul play, like genuine foul play, like stupid foul. For me, there's a distinction. The rest of these things could be sorted out post game, especially if there's an element of, like when you're sitting there adjudicating whether someone's adjusted their head position and at the last minute where they've tackled or something like that. The game doesn't run like that. Things just happen straight in front of you. Like you don't have the instincts. I don't want to get a yellow card. I'm going to do this. I don't think we've got that right, and I just don't like seeing games decided when it's 15-14 or 15-13 or something like that. I don't see other sports suffering in the same way. They just keep the contest going.
How do you then deal with that? What might be a solution to that? Because you don't want to impact the quality of the contest, but at the same point, you don't want to remove consequence for cynical play.
Well, cynical, and then there's genuine foul play. Cynical play. I think you've got to. I mean, I don't have the exact answer, but you can accumulate things. Other sports, they accumulate sanctions and whatever, and then the penalty becomes bigger. So if you get, two yellow cards or something like that, then you have to miss a game. Or something like that, or 3. No one suffers. It's just that person not eligible for self-selection. So 2 or 3 or something like that, and you can go and fight. You can fight the circumstance, but they apply a penalty to it, and maybe the penalty, for a technical breach versus a technical breach being a knockdown or something like that, versus something where there's genuine injury or harm, or the clean out of hoopers somewhere in the middle, because that's potentially an injury causing thing, but it's not malicious. And then there's malicious play. So, I mean, the problem for me, the hooper one for me is more about him coming from the side. Like he cleaned out he just comes in from the side. I haven't seen the gate refereed. I haven't seen the angle, the entry into the ruck refereed the whole season. No one referees it. People just come in whichever way they want. And they go for the ball and whatever, and so it's a bit of so you can tidy that up by having much cleaner lines of, focus on the gate, and you'll get that from a refereeing point of view. I think there's got to be a better way, because I just don't think people want to pay good money to go and see uneven contests. That I know we talked about doing some research on the numbers of what the impact of yellow cards are, but it's definitely got to cost. It's got to be at least a try to the opponents. The yellow cards, and so it's a big decision by the referee to give the opposition a try. That's what you're effectively doing, on average. So I think we've got to understand the implications of that.
We're not talking rugby, we're building it. Rugby Unity.
Well, I think that's worthy of keeping on our list of issues to be addressed when we do speak to World Rugby about refereeing, and continue to look for solutions around issues. I think Eddie Jones's suggestion last week about World Rugby contracting the top 16 referees in the world, and they work for World Rugby. And that is their job, and they are, talking to each other, working with each other on a weekly basis to build that consistency. I think that's a good idea, and I think what you're talking about also is a good idea, that perhaps they can be dealt with later on, because I do think the Hooper incident was, material as it related to the game, and really, was it that big a deal? To me anyway, when he got the yellow card, I was a bit like, Yeah,
I didn't see it.
A frustrating moment.
I didn't see it straight away. Normally you can see things straight away and you go, that doesn't look good.
Yeah.
But I didn't even see it. I was trying to work out what it was for.
Yeah,
and then I realised it was some sort of, so I wasn't even quite sure. So if you're a fan, you've missed that moment. You're looking up at the big screen and you're wondering what's going on. You don't have the same commentary or something like that. But we know in the competition, we were talking the other day about, they've introduced this other red card thing, which we'll talk about another day. This one of the competitions has introduced a variation on the red card, but we'll need to research that and see what the implications of that are. But it's for me that the people pay to see the contest, and in the 15-on-15 allows you to deploy all of the tactics and whatever. Yes, and there are moments in the game where foul play, you have to deal with that, and but you don't see many red cards. Obviously, they go off and evaluate, but it never turns into that situation. But the being off the field for 10 minutes is costly because it does affect how the game's played. So I think they've got to look at something else.
And that one in particular, given that it did lead to that try, and it was a brilliant passage of play by the Australian team, to have it all sort of rewound back to the point of, yellow card, penalty, and away they go, and not too much later they were able to score a try. So, no, I think that is worthy of consideration, and we will keep that on our list of things to talk about. So, the Rugby Championship wrapped up. South Africa finished on 19 points, New Zealand 19 points, Australia 11 points, Argentina 10 points. South Africa winners of the Rugby Championship because of a considerably stronger points differential in their favour. So congratulations to them. But Ewen McKenzie, sitting back and assessing the overall Rugby Championship this year, certainly the best Rugby Championship in memory, really, in terms of a contest. Your thoughts as you sort of look at...
I just had a look at each team and just thought what stuck out in my mind. For me, it was from an Australian point of view, was their resilience, the fact that they stayed in games. That there's some courage and resilience in that. That for me is a feature, and that you can't say you can't coach that, but there's character in that, and if you've got that character, then you've got a pretty good bunch of guys. So that's something you can definitely build on. You can build on the technical parts of the game, and that they've done that, and they've improved their scrum, and the line-out has been good, but there's definitely bits and pieces they can improve on there. But you can't, that character and resilience is hard to coach that. So that Australia, for me, that stuck out, and they were there, and they were in the contest all the time. And the opposition knows that now, so that's a good thing. South Africa knew as old. Australia caught them on the hop at Eden Park, at Ellis Park, and then they sort of fluffed around a bit, but then they ended up back where they wanted to go, which was where they started against Australia in the first 20 minutes, and they ended up back there. But so they've ended up with a new looking back line. Some of the old guard have gone, and a pretty much a known forward pack, but there's a couple of newcomers in there who are doing good things. So they're able to play the game both ways. They can play with panache, they can play with grit and drive and whatever. And then, as Eddie said last week, they're not doing any flashy moves or anything. They're just powering their way over, and you could see that in the game against Argentina. So new as old. Argentina, for me, are the best team to watch. I love watching them play. There's a flair and the way they use the full width of the field. They use use every millimetre, and they did that against South Africa. They get down the sidelines, and so it's pretty impressive. And the speed of their phase play, I like the way the players come on. So they're good to watch. Carreras, fantastic player, and a few others put their hands up as well. So they've been the best team for me to watch. Unfortunately, that means they've come last in the championship, but they were in the game. So there's not much in the game. So that they got towelled in one game, but who didn't? Who didn't get towelled in one game? Everyone got towelled. Each team got towelled once. So other than that, they're in it. So and New Zealand, they stood up. Despite all the criticism and everything that's going on, they stood up. They lost in for and against. Otherwise, they were there. They were in contention. They got through a lot of injury situations around the halfback and whatever. They had to manufacture situations, They found some new players. They're still able to get there. They defended their record. So they stood up and despite the pressure, they're still there and still winning games at the end. So, they had that, like everyone else said, they had a moment, but they were there. So that's typical New Zealand. So they're not far away. That mightn't be as what we remember, but I like the look of some of the new players coming in, and we see that with Roygaard and Carter and these guys look very interesting players. Holland, they've got some good players coming on.
So, obviously, next year New Zealand goes to South Africa, and there won't be a rugby championship. It did seem that Sanzar was moving towards this type of touring policy where perhaps Australia may go to Argentina. There might be more involvement with Japan. New Zealand goes to South Africa. South Africa goes back to New Zealand. In 2027, there is a cut-down version of the Rugby Championship. As someone who's been involved in the Rugby Championship in some way, shape or form since it began, what's your thoughts on how they sort of assemble the tours? Because I think there's a lot to look forward to in these tours. But at the same time, we've now just had the best Rugby Championship in memory, and it seems really that it's going away at a time when it has been compelling over the last few weeks.
I don't actually know the answer. I mean, I love the idea of I think it's good for all the Southern Hemisphere teams to be playing each other in Test matches regularly. I think that's good. So whether that's a byproduct of the tour, at the end of the tour they do something, I'm not sure what the window's left. I don't know how long the tours are. The touring part is important for me. I think it's a really big part of the game that's been lost. And all my favourite memories in rugby is playing for the Wallabies were on long tours, on 6 or 8 week tours, travelling around playing provincial teams and things like that, and the experience of playing and the enthusiasm and meeting the fan base. When you go to Waikato and you go to the traditional strongholds in New Zealand or South Africa or whatever, the fan base, that's there. A lot of people can't get to the test. They can't get a ticket for the test matches. So there are opportunities to come and watch midweek games and whatever. And it's the same for the players. It's their opportunity to put their hand up in front of selectors and whatever. And it's difficult. It's difficult for the touring team, but you also find out a lot about yourself. So it's a really good place to find out about players and develop players and give players an opportunity. So to put their hand up. So then you're increasing your depth. So I think that as long as they don't tour with 1,000 players, then it's all right. You've got to actually put there's a bit of hardship in touring where you've got players who've got to back up on the bench midweek and things like that. So it does put players under pressure that way. But that's part of the character and part of working out where the player sits in terms of his contribution to the squad. So getting the numbers right to make it economic, but I think it's a really good idea. And whether the championship, I'd love the championship still to feature, whether it just drops down to you just have a one-off game and just play the other 3 teams once. That's better than nothing for me. I think we've got to have that contact. I know I'm being selfish, but from an Australian point of view, we need to be playing against South Africa and New Zealand and Argentina. We need to play against their styles of rugby because they're the teams you're going to come up against in a semi-final or a quarter-final of the World Cup anyway. You've got to be able to deal with it.
All right. Well, listen, we'll watch that roll out as it comes, but congratulations to all of the teams involved in the Rugby Championship this year. Spectacular, so enjoyable. And, when you look at the numbers of fans that were involved, obviously sellout crowds everywhere, and particular congratulations to the Australian team and the way that they dealt with their fans after matches, really making that effort, because that is where we are going to start to solve some of those problems. If we can create memories, we create emotions with the fans and more fans over time, that will lead to lifelong love of the game. And but I think the Australian team in particular did that well. But congratulations to all the teams involved and good luck to all of them. on their end of season tours, where again we get to do it all again. It's one of the great things, Ewen McKenzie, isn't it, of being involved in rugby, is that okay, this rugby championship is finished, but now we get to look ahead to that great tour at the end of the year where all of the Southern Hemisphere teams are in the north and everyone's playing. And, on a Saturday, there might be 3 matches or even 4 matches in a row. We even have the Tier 2 matches that are being played over there. I know Spain are playing a lot of Ireland A, England A. So there's going to be so much rugby going on. What is your memory of that time when you get to travel to Europe at this time of the year? It's not quite winter, starting to get a little bit cold. It's the beginning of the rugby season. I certainly loved it in my time travelling with the Wallabies. It's just such a great time of the year to be there. Everyone's excited about the international rugby, and often the football that's played is very entertaining.
It's the perfect time to go there because it obviously precedes the winter, so you don't encounter the frozen pitches and the snow and things like that. So that's a perfect time to be traveling around Europe. So that's part of it. There's traveling there as a touring group when you might be there for 6 weeks in France or 8 weeks in the UK, traveling around. So that's a bit different to playing in the sort of November test window where you're going, you're playing 4 or 5 tests. But it's the same. It is the same in a way. It's short distance travel, so you're not encumbered by big travel days and things like that. You can go from Wales to France or whatever it is, and it's a 1 or 2 hours on a plane, not even that, and you're there and you can get ensconced in where you're going to be the next location. So it's really good like that. You don't lose time, so that's perfect. But the cultures are so different, obviously. So each place has got its own. And I'm a history guy, so I love the history of the towns, cities. I love the architecture, etc. So I love I go to Edinburgh every week if I could. I love Edinburgh and those sorts of places. You get to do all that. That can be a distraction. So it's a matter of managing all that. But that's part of the when you're traveling, But the games are big. I was there in 2013, I think it was, and it does. The order of games matters. So how the games roll out matters from a confidence point of view. And I think Australia have got England first up. So that's a big game. The same when I took the Wallabies there, same thing. And we lost that game. And I wish we had the TMO's interest in the game that we had back then, because we wouldn't have lost that game. But that's the way it is. When the guy puts his leg a foot over the touchline, 90 metres up the field. Anyway, but you lose that game, we won the rest. You beat Ireland in Ireland and beat Scotland in Scotland, and it's a real challenge when you go to those places and they're playing in front of their home crowds and whatever. It's a real challenge. And then you've got Italy over there as well, and France is special too. So when they're playing in front of their family and friends, it's a difficult challenge. So, but all the stadiums are good. Some of them they're all been redeveloped since my day, and they're really nice and perfect pitches and whatever. So it's terrific. I wish that time of year is a brilliant time to be over there, and you just got to be trying to rack up the wins. But I think the Southern Hemisphere could do pretty well on this tour. It's always been a bit of a 50-50 thing. I guess it depends on who's available and who's getting repairs, but I think the Southern Hemisphere could do quite well on this tour at the end of this year.
So I'll roll into a question from Hugh Jazz, who does ask around this. With Japan set to face Australia, South Africa and Ireland, 3 formidable sides in world rugby, and it's not just Japan. Obviously Australia's got big matches to play as well. How much emphasis do you place on the mental side of preparation? Do you see instilling belief and resilience as being just as important as the tactical and technical work on the training field?
For me, the tactical and technical is the way to instill the confidence. Like you got to be able to sell it to the players that you know how to beat the opposition. So that comes with experience, and the more you coach against them, and you've got to have some sort of track record. But for Eddie, Eddie coaching Japan against Australia. He's got that wonderful win against South Africa in the World Cup. So he's got a track record. So there's no reason for the players not to believe that he can't come up with a method to be able to play. So the method gives you the confidence. It's not, you're not going to get there and stand going, we're going to do it, and yelling out sort of nothing statements. That's not going to get the players, as much as you might see that on television or something. That's not how it works. You've got to give them very precise things for them to focus on to go, oh, okay. And you see it in games. I saw it in the game on the weekend. South Africa, they had their kickoff after half time. They kicked off centre field. Right, I always talk of kickoff. That's how the game starts. That's how you set the tone, set the mentality of that. They did everything they don't normally do. They normally kick off deep and go down, and they didn't. They kicked off centre field and they won the ball back. They ended up getting a penalty. So there's plenty of things you can do on the field to keep the opposition guessing, and so that's part of the strategy. If you're playing against a big team of bullies or something like that, you've got to find a way to be able to outsmart them. And that's where I've enjoyed that. I'm sure Eddie's going to enjoy the challenge of that across those games. He's got some big games coming up, but that's where you instill the confidence, because you show them away. It's not the other way around. It's not ranting and raving. It's actually specifics.
Okay, very interesting. And a second question from at PB from YouTube. I do look forward to this podcast immensely. That's good. Fantastic. No BS host. Great commentary. Like to pose the question. Ewen McKenzie, has the women's game become what we want from the men's game? Lots of variety in tactics, open space, and equally in tight contests. But moreover, a willingness to play regardless of approach.
Yeah, I think there's an honesty in that you see in rugby. You see it at schoolboy level, at school level. You saw it in the Women's World Cup for sure. There's a freshness and honesty about it. I think the men's professional game, when you're at it 7 days a week, they've got a lot of time to develop interesting and exciting tactics, and you can also dull the game down too. You can do it. It works both ways. So, maybe some of that's lost. Some of the free spirit's lost because there's the pressure. The pressure is there, but you'll find in all levels of sport, the more the women's game's rapidly grown in terms of audience and whatever. So they'll be looking for more investment, and it goes like that. And then when there's more investment, more sponsors, there's more pressure, there's more time, there's less time because you've got to give more to where the money's coming from, and then it can have an impact. It becomes more desperate you got to win or maintain your position. So I think that where they're at the moment, it's a great space. But as more money comes in, the pressure comes along with it, and that's just the way it is. And so I don't think there's a negative aspect to the men's play. I just think that athletically and whatever they've been able to find ways to be able to shut teams down and whatever, and develop tactics, and they've done that on the back of the being able to do it train 7 days a week. I think that's now becoming the opportunity for, not talking about England, I'm talking about across the women's game in some of the other countries where they've actually been able to spend their time, full time, at it. And once you do that, you've got more things that you can do, positive and negative, to close a game down or open a game up. So I think that's all ahead. But schoolboy rugby doesn't get afflicted by that because you're at school and then you leave and you go on. So it's just played with an honest spirit, very willing and whatever, but everyone showcases their skills. That's the way it is.
All right. Well, listen, thanks again, the third voice, for your contributions, your comments and your questions. Please keep them coming, and we will keep answering and asking those questions of our experts. And to the women's game, just some updates. The RFU, not letting the grass grow under their feet. They've come out with their plan for how are they going to continue their dominance, and they've released a plan where they're looking for 100,000 registered players by 2027. They're targeting £60 million in revenue in 5 years, and they want 3 million fans by 2030. Now, I really like the fact that the RFU has taken advantage of the back of the Women's Rugby World Cup. It was a trick that's been missed by World Rugby, delaying the release of their strategic plan until January of next year, losing all of this momentum. The thing I like about this, Ewen McKenzie, is the fact we've got some targets. £60 million in 5 years, 3 million fans by 2030, 100,000 players by 2027. And I'm sure in underneath that are other plans that look forward to that. So good to see the RFU moving quickly to take advantage of the Red Roses' success.
100%. That's, clear-cut KPIs, makes it easier for everyone to keep tally of where they're up to. And so all credit to England for getting straight into it. I mean, they haven't mucked around. It's only been a week, and they're already out there. So there is a
had it in the bottom drawer.
There is
up it comes.
Yeah, there it is. And now they've got some targets. So there's no one going to work every day doesn't know what the objective is. So I think that's really good.
Yeah,
I think that's a really. I don't know what happens for Canada. It'd be interesting to see what happens in Canada. They played in the final and they did really well. So hopefully they've got something similar. Obviously, it probably won't be the same numbers, but something similar and the same thing to grab, to try and capitalise on the fact that. But I think I saw something online just about Shania Twain, I think it was, who was following the Canadian women. So, you get a few celebrities on board, Russell Crowe. You get a few celebrities on board, and things start to happen. So, but you got to maintain that.
But it would be great to see, from all of the countries, not just the women's countries, but the men's countries, where there's some visibility around what it is that we're trying to do, because. For mine, this is one of rugby's greatest weaknesses, is that we have this incredible sport played across all of these different countries, but there is a disconnect. And we're not particularly well joined up. So the Premiership's underway, or the Prem, as they now call it in the UK, but it's invisible in this part of the world. The top 14, again, similar, pretty much invisible. Yes, the games are played on Stan, and you can see them on the TV, but there's not any sense of communication, of narrative, of storytelling, of getting to know the stars. And it's one of the great weaknesses in the sport at the moment. At a time when all sports are looking for international growth, we have the platform on which to build this. But at the moment, we're just missing the trick. We're not having international memberships of clubs from the south for everyone to be involved in. Same in the north.
Well, we get the football. Obviously, we get the English soccer, the English football. That turns up. That turns up on the Channel 9 News or something every night. They'll report a couple of results, usually if Ange is winning or not. At Nottingham Forest, like whether he wins or not, that's getting a run at the moment. But they'll just out of the blue they'll throw up a couple of game results, and you go, well, it's interesting. I'm not personally interested, but they pop them up on the news. So clearly there's enough reason to put them up there. They don't put all the results up there; they just put up a couple, and so that's at least you know what's going on. At least you sort of know that things are happening, and maybe I should be looking at that. That's what you feel like. If you see a result, you go, oh, maybe I better check that out online and see what's going on. So, but you don't generally get any of that. So,
we need to. It is a simple fix for rugby. It's an absolute simple fix that we need to invest in aligning the game. And it's not just what's happening in the Prem, what's happening in the top 14. We've got the URC. But when Super Rugby Americas happens, when MLR happens, when these competitions are taking place, we do need to have awareness of what's going on, so as that we can follow our great sport as it rolls through this, incredibly compelling, annual global calendar.
There's a great opportunity for someone to centralise. I know you talked about Reddit the other day, and we were trying to find some links to try and find a central hub where you can just go. And I've been looking at a couple, but I still don't get it sort of leans one way or the other. You don't get the total. There's no total picture where you get. So you find a favourite place and you go and drag a bit of information here and there, but it's very difficult. So I think there's a really good opportunity for someone to own the space where they actually report all the results. I guess World Rugby does that, but it's not in a way that's interesting. It's just a score. Whereas you really want to be able to look into the game and see, and that's why ESPN offers a test.
And who are the and who are the emerging stars in Chile?
Well, that's right.
Who have now qualified? Who we're going to see at 2027?
Yeah,
and the same. Yeah. Across the board.
And maybe it's too big, I don't know. But going back to where we started with the women, obviously England are the best set up financially to be able to capitalise and put a plan out. I fear that all the other countries are waiting for the World Rugby to be able to say, we're going to give you this much money. So then they'll roll out a plan accordingly. Yeah. Unfortunately, so everyone else is not as bold and not in the position to be able to do it. So therefore, they're not going to do anything for another 4 or 5 months. Will not be able to do anything unless they're getting the inside word, but basically nothing happened. Or they can't announce anything for 4 or 5 months and the opportunity is gone. The whole Women's World Cup momentum's lost in other countries.
Yeah.
I fear that that's
and
the
again,
problem.
here in Australia, certainly here in Australia, you would like to think, the clock has started ticking. The Wallaroos have made a very good impact, I believe. And what we need to see now is a decision around, who's going to be the next coach? What's the funding look like? Here's what the calendar looks like. These are the games for next year. This is what we're doing with Super Rugby W. You have to bring certainty so as that people can start to connect and understand and realise, all right, okay, well, that there's what I'm aiming at for next year, and this is how I can get in behind it. So I do hope that certainty does come to the game, not just here in Australia, but around the world. And some other news, actually, and again, this is sort of branding. And to be able to see that for the United Nations International Day of the Girl on the 11th of October, Mattel are putting forward their Barbie dolls of Portia Woodman-Wycliffe, Ellie Kildunn, Alona Marr, and Narissa Condé from France. So there are going to be these 4 Barbie dolls to celebrate the Women's World Cup. But isn't that fantastic in terms of where they have, reached, when you consider how big the Barbie franchise is and that the Barbie franchise is now connecting to women's rugby, huge opportunity with that. So that to me is, again, just a great demonstration of the impact and the power of what has happened at the Women's Rugby World Cup. But we've got to get to it, people, really take advantage.
No Ken dolls, no Ken dolls for the male, for the men's game. No,
not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Maybe around the 2027 World Cup.
The women's game is leading the men's game in something, which is good.
Fantastic to see that. And just before we go, a program of rugby unity won't be complete without me having a crack at R360. So I might as well have a go again. Finn Smith, the Northampton and England number 10, is now signed a long-term contract, multi-year contract to play for Northampton and England. And certainly everything coming out of England would tend to suggest that if you play if you play for or sign for R360, you won't be able to play in the national team, and that does look to be emerging in Australia, and I imagine it will be the same elsewhere. But if I was R360 and you're looking for those big names, Finn Smith would have been absolutely top of the pops, the emerging number 10 for England, a British and Irish Lion, a stunning player. And he did mention in his, when he was the announcement around his signing, saying that he did have other options. And I just think this is bad news for R360, because we now move to the point where it's one thing to sign a commitment of, yes, okay, I might. But now, if you're going to put your signature on a contract, not only is all the legal things going to come for players who have already signed a contract and they're already bound, but they've decided that they might want to sign another contract. But now this is going to mean, well, okay, you are going to commit to play for however many years in this new competition. Seriously unimpressed by the backers who they've got at the moment. I just don't think the money's there. They look a bit lightweight to me. So I really don't think the funding is there in terms of the scale. But again, we still don't know the detail because they won't tell us what the detail is for whatever reason. And again, I just think it's got hairs all over it, this R360, and the sooner it goes away, the better. It's a massive distraction. You're seeing progress. It's not perfect in England at the moment, but the top division and the second division, a good friend of Rugby Unity, Simon Gillam, is the chair of that second division that's emerging, that's building and growing, and it's becoming stronger in the UK. The URC's moving in the right direction. Japan's moving in the right direction, and certainly top 14 is moving. And we had some great improvements in the Super Rugby last year as well. So I think it's time we all put our focus into that. Because that's the way for me to develop the international players, which I think is the big thing, and another of the massive risks of players signing for R360. Is it the way to prepare people for international rugby? We don't know, because we don't know too much about it, because they won't tell us. But again, I just find the whole thing a massive distraction. And I know Ewen McKenzie, you've been looking on. I'm not sure what sort of opinions you have about it, but I certainly can't see anything good coming of it.
I think we need to keep a tally of who's actually committed, because once you've signed a contract, you can't induce someone to sign another contract that breaks that contract. You can't do that. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. So who's actually already signed beyond, let's say who's signed for the next 12 months somewhere? You can virtually rule them out, because I don't know that they can suddenly just go and sign somewhere else when they've already got a contract in place. So that's one thing from a legal. Someone can correct me. The lawyers out there can give us advice. So then that probably only leaves a X number. That maybe there's 1/3 of the people out there, wouldn't even be 1/3, quarter of the players out there who might be eligible to play. That's why they're targeting rugby league players and whatever, because they're off contract and whatever. They're in a different situation. So we've got to look at actually who's actually available to sign a contract, who's free to sign a contract that isn't encumbered by an existing contract. So otherwise you're going to end up in court.
And when you think about it, at this time of the cycle towards 2027, most of the top players are all committed.
There's been a lot of announcements across this year just for Wallabies re-signing. So as far as I'm concerned, if they've got a contract already, I don't think legally you can induce someone to break the contract. So unless there's some clauses in there or something that we don't know about, I think you've already in a contract, you've got to ride that contract out. So I don't see how they're suddenly going to become available next year or whenever that's meant to start, unless they're a free agent. Unless they're a free agent now, like they're up for a contract now, which I think they'd only be maybe, let's say, 10%. Around the world. So you've got to field 6 teams with, and I'm sure that's why they're talking to rugby league players who have never played the game, because they can probably, contractually, they're probably free. Some of those guys, maybe, I don't know.
But the thing that gets me though is, and again, Brett Robinson made a good point the other day, speaking at the World Rugby Council, is about the game can only go forward if it goes forward together. You just can't have this idea of they're going to come in and privatise a part of the game and pull it out and run their own separate show.
I think rugby's already. I think rugby's already had that revolution. Well, I was involved. We've already talked about it last week.
We discussed it last week.
We've already had that. We went from amateur to professional. We went from no money to some money. That's already happened. It happened a long time ago. So nearly 30 years ago. So that's. It's been and gone. So I don't think you have a second revolution. I don't think I don't care what cricket's done. I think if there was an identifiable window where nothing else was happening, maybe they can pitch something to World Rugby and slot in there, and that becomes that, right? That's fine if there's an identifiable, but there is no identifiable, because we can't get the game sorted now. We can't find a window. Yeah. So that's it. So I don't see.
And there's so much to be done, you think about that north-south alignment that we were just talking about. How about we put our efforts into that? How about we try to fix some of the challenges that we've got at the moment?
If we fix that, maybe there is an IPL type window for something to happen like that. And they do, like cricket. Maybe that, but the cricket at the moment is like this. They just don't stop playing. Yeah. and they pop up on TV, and I see it pops up on TV. And to be honest, I don't mind cricket, but I don't turn it on because I never know if it says it's a live game, but is it? Because they just keep saying it's a live game, but it's not. It's a replay or something that's happened 3 weeks ago. I can't keep up with, and so things like the Ashes and whatever, they are still valuable, but they get lost in a lot of other stuff. But I find I watch cricket. I watch cricket in the cricket season, and then once the cricket season's over, I stop watching it. You know what I mean?
I'm exactly the same. Cricket has lost me. I'm a member of the Sydney Cricket Ground and have been since I was 10 years. But I know that the Test match will be there in January for the Ashes, and I will be going along.
That's right.
And I'll
so
be enjoying
we
it
celebrate.
as I have.
We celebrate the window that we're used to, but we don't get beyond that, and that's probably a lesson too. You know, so. Yeah.
Certainly. All right. Well, there we go. So thank you, Ewen McKenzie, and a big thanks to you, audience, for coming back once again. We do really appreciate your engagement across the platform, whether it is on the podcast, watching, listening to the podcast on whatever platform that you are, on the social media. Fantastic to see so many of you turning up there, whether it's on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, wherever else, and we really do enjoy the commentary and the comments and the questions. So please keep those coming. And also the Substack. Make sure that you jump across to the Substack. There's always interesting content being published there for your interest as well. But another great program of Rugby Unity for today. We'll be back on Friday with our regular program. But for the moment, please be kind to each other. My name is David Pembroke, and it's bye for now.